celebrity to get away with sexually assaulting women. At the second presidential debate on Sunday, Trump said he was not proud of his behavior and that he had apologized to his family and the American people, but he also brushed off those comments as, quote, locker room talk. Well, many NFL players have chimed in saying this isn't how they talk in locker rooms. Former NFL punter Chris Cluey wrote a piece for Vox speaking out against Trump and his definition of the locker room culture. We want to share a portion of that with you. Cluey writing, "You're wrong in the only type of wrong an over-tanned ham hock like yourself can accomplish, plummeting past the morass of gross incivility into the abyss of depraved sociopathy. How do I know this? Simple. I was in an NFL locker room for 8 years, the very definition of the macho alpha male environment you're so feebly trying to evoke to protect yourself. And not once did anyone approach your breathtaking depths of arrogance and imbecility. Oh, sure, we had some dumb guys and some guys I wouldn't want to hang out with on any sort of regular basis. But we never had anyone say anything as foul and demeaning as you did on that tape. And hell, I played a couple years with a guy who later turned out to be a serial rapist. Even he never talked like that." Jeff Saturday here with us to join the conversation. We appreciate having a player perspective, but I want to start with you, Max. What was your take?
I think Chris Cluey is very angry at Donald Trump, but in terms of his, and for good reason, in terms of Cluey's assertion that he never heard that kind of talk, look, if you take, and Trump is talking, when they spin the talk, because they're trying to make an excuse, as locker room talk, I don't think they're just talking about professional sports locker rooms.
Right.
They're talking about locker rooms at, I guess, country clubs or gyms, although I haven't heard that in my experience, that. But if you're talking about, let's just limit it to professional locker rooms. There are 32 NFL teams, over 50 guys in each locker room. There are 25, just take baseball and football, there are 25 guys, over 25 guys in every Major League Baseball locker room, 30 teams. You're talking about right there, 2,000 plus guys every season. For how many seasons now? Of course, things like this have been said, just because if you get that many people having that many conversations, anything you can imagine that might be said will be said at some point. I think what's really going on here is that very few would want to admit that anything this vulgar would be said because they don't want to become clickbait, which in this environment you will become clickbait. But I also think what's happening is essentially Cluey and others, many, many others from professional sports, are saying, don't damn us, when they hear locker room, don't damn us by association. Don't damn us by associating Trump and his comments and that kind of way of thinking with even a part of our professional work environment. I think that's what's going on here.
Stephen?
Let me say this. I've been covering professional sports for over 24 years as a journalist. I started off my career, before I started my career off at the New York Daily News as a high school reporter, I covered as an intern Greensboro, North Carolina, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, et cetera, et cetera. Started off at the New York Daily News, went to the Philadelphia Inquirer for 7 years. In the midst of being at the Philadelphia Inquirer, also worked for CNN-SI, then Fox Sports, and then obviously ESPN all of these years. I've been in locker rooms for over 23, 24 years. I've never heard what Donald Trump alluded to as it pertains to locker room talk. I've heard vile talk. I particularly am alarmed when us as the black community is highly sensitive to the N-word, as well we should be. But white reporters and others are walking to the locker room and players are playing some of the music with the misogynistic lyrics and the N-word being spewed every other word. The loudspeakers booming, and there's no regard for the fact that there are reporters that happen to not be black in the room listening to guys dancing and singing and saying all of this stuff. Having said all of that, I've never heard in any locker room, NFL, NBA, college, pro, Major League Baseball clubhouses. Hell, I've even been in the locker rooms inside of, for a hockey game. For crying out loud. I've never heard it. Not one time. In terms of grabbing a woman's privates, you know, you just gonna take it, you force yourself on her. You know, when you're a celebrity, you can get anything, you can do what you want to do. There are unquestionably people who may feel that way. But verbalized and talked about and echoed in such a way, no, I've never heard that at all. And so what I would say is that when we look at it from that perspective, you know, I don't blame the Chris Clouis of the world and others, and Udonis Haslem for the Miami Heat and others speaking up and speaking out, because they have wives and girlfriends, they have children, they have daughters. They don't want anybody thinking that that's the kind of stuff that is appropriate, that that's the kind of stuff that is ordinary, because it's not. And to me, when Donald Trump said that, by the way, I have a problem with everybody jumping to the locker rooms thinking that he was talking about baseball or basketball or football. Why couldn't he have been talking about golf? He owns a bunch of golf courses, a bunch of country clubs. I mean, how come they didn't bring that up? Why is it that it got to be, you know, the brothers playing in the NFL or the brothers playing in the NBA? How come nobody brought up golf? Donald Trump owned a USFL team. But that was about it. He didn't own an NBA team, didn't own an NFL team. But what he is synonymous with, other than his real estate ventures, buildings, and beyond, is golf. How come nobody asked that question? How come I'm not hearing a bunch of quotes from a bunch of golfers? Because that, to me, would be what the billionaire is most synonymous with than the other sports. That is what I have to say about that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think when Chris is talking about it, I think it's offensive because when you get the locker room, in air quotes, that kind of stigma, it hurts. I've lived in an NFL locker room for 14 years, a college for 5, high school before that. To say I never heard anybody say, filthy things or things that were dead wrong. And what Donald Trump said was dead wrong. And it should have never been said, should have been apologized for, and not make anything, not try to tighten anything. Just own it. I own it. I said it. I shouldn't have said it. I was dead wrong. But when everything kind of got spun, to your point, spun politically to try to make it or ease the situation, when you go to locker rooms, there are a lot of things said in locker rooms that you would never want to be overheard by a mother, sister, daughter, and I got daughter. I mean, listen, it is a different world. You do not want those things being said. But I can speak for my own locker rooms. Being in Indianapolis and Green Bay for 1 year, that was not common discussion. Okay, there would be outliers, conversations, but for the large majority of the conversations we had in our locker room were good conversations. They were not like this. Now, was there, people playing jokes on each other, busting each other up? Absolutely. But to the point where it went with Donald Trump, it didn't go there very often. But for guys to say they never heard those kinds of things, I would be surprised that no one ever heard someone talk absolutely, because that's just being there. I've heard it, and and listen, I totally disagree with it, but to say that it's never been said, that's where I would
just the number of conversations that are going on, everything that you can imagine, and some you can't.
I think the problem for me was that when you tried to justify it by saying locker room talk. Because even if it's in the locker room, it's not right.
No, that's a cop-out,
yeah, exactly.
and that's mental manipulation.
Exactly.
And you're not an athlete, and last time I checked, you're not in a jersey. So why are you blaming athletes? And I don't want to hear that.
No. Let me, whoa.
Yeah.
Let me chime in.
Okay.
And I'm going to chime in to Molly's point with a question for you, Jeff Saturday, and for you, Max Kellerman. And I have to ask this. Trump's comments, is it fair to say that he was talking, dare I say, about the rich white society locker rooms of country clubs and golf courses? I mean, that's what I was alluding to earlier. Because when he talks locker room, is it possible that this billionaire who owns golf courses, you're talking about the country club, you're talking about the golf courses, you're talking about affluent white individuals that are distant from the normal rules and regulations that govern the rest of us, that may have felt free enough to say such things? I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't want to step out on a limb by making an accusation, but it is a question that folks in the locker rooms, particularly African Americans, might have at this point.
Yeah, it would be. I mean, I didn't grow up that way, so I have no idea what golf locker rooms are like.
Yeah,
Never been around them. I mean, I've been in NFL, college. I've played baseball, wrestled. I've done all those kinds of things, but I haven't been in their locker rooms.
You know what they talk about in the locker room? And I don't golf. But I have been in all different kinds of locker rooms. And you know what the locker room talk is? How's your cholesterol, right?
Yeah.
Like, what is that medication you're taking? How's your family? Those
well,
kind of
I
things.
wouldn't go that
like,
far.
That's locker.
I didn't know that. I've never heard that.
The point is, like, locker room talk, most talk when men are alone is not depraved talk.
Right.
Sometimes it is, particularly when you're adolescent or in a group that fosters an adolescent dynamic.
That's a great point.
But generally, it's adult conversations, even when it's adults behaving like children.
And I was going to say this. I would say the things that I can remember that were things that you definitely were my younger years in the game, whether it be college, right? Because you're a bunch of young men who don't know.
All
exactly. And I'll say this, as a high school coach now, I help coach high school with my son's team. We are very specific of how we treat our young men in respecting everyone, the way that you handle yourself in school, out of school, on the field. You're trying to shape these into good, productive young men in your community. So we do have these conversations. No different than Matt Brown having these conversations with me when I was in college about, hey, Jeff, you can't act like this, right? You can't behave this way. You can't speak to someone this way. You can't use this language in this situation, right? And I was a young guy, but I was taught, right? But when you try to generalize locker room talk, I think it was tongue in cheek. I think he was going to Max, to your point, where male dominated, in this certain environment, guys will act or say a certain thing. But to stamp it with locker room, I think it went above. And I think
no one wants to be stigmatized by Trump's language.
No one wants a stamp putting on them in their profession that this is the way guys talk, because it's not true. And again, being in that locker room, that is not what happened in the Indianapolis Colts locker room, the Green Bay Packer locker room. Those conversations were not had. If they were had, maybe they're had in private, but as a general whole, in totality, that was not the conversation. They were much more productive. I mean, it could be religion, politics, family, finances, you name it, all those things. I mean, the locker room is where you grow and develop as a person a ton of times. This conversation is a small part, almost a minuscule amount.
And I'd hope a presidential candidate would be held to a higher standard than describing women as objects. But that's where we are. Jeff staying with us to talk Cam Newton. How much is he to blame for the Panthers' slow start to this season? That is coming up next.
Let's get it cracking. Let's start the session. March list the competition, balls by that action. You can never debate it. This is actual fact. Stephen A. and Max Kale said they say it's a rap. I'm like, say what? Say what? What's up with all my haters? I'm a ball when I perform. So my jersey's in the air. I'm allergic to my haters. Every morning I prepare. Lot of clothes I can wear just like them Oregon players. Yeah, quack, quack. What it do? Rap like it's nothing to it. Matter of fact, you can ask hard and I'm cooking too. Base guard cooking too. Nah, look at you. Great mind. They embrace mine like a crooked tooth. 4 takes, that's you. 3 takes, not me. 2 takes if you lucky.